I can almost guarantee you, Karl, 95% is based on what you learned from others about you, and you made it yours. And most of that you have never questioned.
Your business's success depends on relationships. Relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Karl Ponto. Each week, I'll bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week, I'm excited to connect with Markus Neukom. Markus is a legacy alchemist and strategic force multiplier, specializing in transforming high achievers into future-defining leaders. With over 2 decades of experience advising founders, CEOs, and boards, Markus helps leaders eliminate blind spots, close execution gaps, and stop the silent drain of millions and lost potential. His expertise bridges the worlds of leadership, influence, and high-impact decision-making, challenging conventional thinking and unlocking true strategic power. Through his proprietary alchemy framework, Markus doesn't just teach leadership, he redefines it. Today, he's here to share how leaders can step beyond achievement and into the realm of inevitable success. Congrats on the alchemy framework and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Thank you so much, Karl. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So I'd imagine one of the things that hold a lot of leaders back, especially ones that are new to the leadership role, is imposter syndrome and self-doubt. So tell me more about how those impact leaders and what they can do to overcome it.
You're absolutely spot on, Karl. And what I have to say is the journey most owners or founders actually take until they get to the point is horrendous. I speak with people, they have paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for coaches. They hired someone for accounting, they hired someone for business development, they hired someone for sales, they hired someone for HR, and guess what? It still doesn't change. Because what it comes down to is the bottleneck is almost always the owner, the founder, the person at the helm. So when they have spent all that money, that's usually when they meet me. We have a discussion, and within moments, honestly, I realize that person has what is called the glass ceiling above their heads. So you can picture it like this. They had once a dream, once a vision, and they took off with a little rocket, and then suddenly the sun got very hot, and they started shrinking and returned to base. So they did this again, and you see my hand, every time it goes less high. And suddenly they have developed this baseline where they say it's as good as it gets. And then they start hiring outside consultants and coaches. Like some of them, as I said, literally spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they say, Markus, nothing changed. And that's when I say, look, what really happens is, do you still believe that you have what it takes? And then it's usually this movement. They look down. And that's the sign, no, actually, I don't anymore. I have resigned. And that's when I say, you know what we have to do is we have to rekindle that dream. We have to rekindle that vision you once had. And I'm here to actually help you remember what you once set off to do. So you see, it is totally opposite of what the whole consulting and coaching industry teaches you. It's about tactics. It's about strategy, right? It's not. It's not about methodology. You mentioned my alchemy. You know what alchemy is? I am alchemy. Alchemy, my methodology is nothing else what comes out of me very intuitively. So I don't have a methodology I follow. The methodology I follow is what I brought to table to print what is usually in me. So people understand slightly what's going to happen when I work with them. But imposter syndrome, self-doubt, Karl, is absolute, I would say 98% of all the reasons why either a company fails, stalls, or doesn't reach the level they actually could reach.
And it makes sense because if the leader doesn't believe anymore, even if they're not necessarily aware or mindful of that self-doubt or can't really put words to it, it infects and it impacts their behavior, and that radiates out from them in the way they deal with their team members or the way they deal with clients, and that self-doubt and the feeling like they can't achieve what they set out to, even if verbally or like in their communication they claim to still believe it, internally if they don't believe it, then that will be felt and impacts the rest of the business. So I can see how that'd be a really big bottleneck that outside consultants can't really help with, because it's a mindset shift that is really holding the company back, and the leader needs to work on that themselves, because there's no way to for an outside consultant to really solve that unless they're really working one-on-one directly with the leader on their own mental blocks. So I imagine you have some great stories of helping some leaders overcome this sort of imposter syndrome. Do you have one you can share?
Let me share something concrete first. When I was looking into imposter syndrome, I wrote quite extensively on LinkedIn. So if somebody is interested in reading about my early thoughts and my journey to where I am today, feel free to check out my LinkedIn posts. So what happened then was suddenly a person and then a second person reached out, dear friends of mine, and I really hold them in high esteem. And they said to me, Markus, what you wrote about the symptoms of imposter syndrome, this is something I totally buy into. However, that whole imposter syndrome thing, that doesn't apply to me. And as I said, Karl, I knew them quite well. So I looked at their lives, I started reflecting my own life, and I suddenly realized, that's interesting. Imposter syndrome is not the problem. Imposter syndrome basically disguises itself as the problem. It is actually a symptom of a way deeper issue. But let's talk first about imposter syndrome for a moment. If you look at the dictionary and you look up imposter syndrome says, in spite of actually having all it takes, knowing that you have all it takes, you still don't trust it. So keep this in mind. We table this for a quick sec to come back. So what happened was, I then looked at the syndrome. The syndrome is basically, in layman terms, let's say you have illnesses which can't be described, can't be explained, and then what it becomes is a syndrome. So basically, when I diagnose you as an expert, and by the way, there are experts who do diagnose you with imposter syndrome, and they help you with the imposter syndrome, they basically paralyze you. Because as soon as you get a diagnosis of a syndrome, pardon my French, you're screwed. You're cooked. And that's when I understood, stop. I have to take the focus entirely away from the imposter syndrome and look at the underlying cause of it. And you know what the underlying cause is?
What's the underlying cause?
In the end, it comes down to that we do not understand who we really are. That's what it comes down to. We do not understand who we really are. We do not know who we really are. And based on that, we put trust into it. We don't know and we don't understand. Does that make sense?
So when you say we don't know who we really are, can you unpack that some? Because what do you mean by you don't know who we really are?
I know this is quite a challenge what I bring out now. I make a claim, a public claim. Probably not more than 5%, including me, have no bloody clue what our potential really is. We do not know who we are, what our strengths are, what our skills are, what our weaknesses are, why have we come and why are we who we are today. We have not worked through our story. We have not worked through our lives. So basically we are basing ourselves on fractional mirroring from outside. So if I'd ask you, who are you today? I can almost guarantee you, Karl, 95% is based on what you learned from others about you, and you made it yours. And most of that you have never questioned. And as you probably know, most people have less problems to accept their inequality and inability, have less problems to accept their weaknesses than actually name just 1, 2, or even 3 real strengths. Because that's when the human system starts to fight. Like if I talk about all your weaknesses, we can talk about ours. I'm sure you can just fill the time, right? Because Merck says it all. But when I start talking about strength, about the beauty of who you are, all the power and the strength, everything you have, that's usually when the conversation is done in 10 minutes. Because usually platitudes are coming, what the strengths are. So I'll give you an example. When I was in HR, in human resources, I conducted probably thousands of interviews. And one question was always, what are your strengths? Give me 3 strengths. And, a quick study. So I quickly realized, okay, strengths are usually all rehearsed. So they knew what kind of strengths are applicable to this kind of a position. And I just realized that's just BS, nothing else. So I did something really interesting, and that's actually what I do with my clients, Karl. I asked them, imagine I had just met the former boss of yours who really thinks highly of you. Exactly that you just had in mind, Karl. Imagine I had asked him, what makes Karl special? What are Karl's 3 biggest real strengths? Guess what happened? This person started thinking, what would the other person say about me in truth and in honesty and in reality? Made it themselves their own and started talking about it. And what I figured very quickly is I basically used the psychological trick by almost bypassing all the senses which hold you back from talking about the real true you and helping them to get into the back door of their mind. And then they suddenly had the liberty to talk about who they really believe and know they are. So that makes sense, right?
Yeah,
That
I
was
can see
mind blowing. And I just did that over and over. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
No. I like that method because the whole idea that most people's view of themselves is something that's been reflected back by other people. It's not something that they necessarily hold internally. And it's a lot of just kind of these labels and sorting. It's not really a personal introspection result. It's something that they've been either told or like they think is what the other person wants to hear, like in a job interview sort of thing, like you're mentioning about the HR thing. But I like that exercise that if you can use that to, they're more comfortable talking about what they think other people think about them, to feel better about themselves instead of what they're like the negative aspects. And I can see how that would kind of get around some of the mental blocks or self-doubt that would keep them from seeing how capable they really are, which is pretty cool.
Absolute spot on. So let's go to imposter syndrome for a moment. What I basically say is imposter syndrome's real root is an authenticity struggle. Authenticity means I believe I know who I am and I am true to that. But the struggle is that I don't really am authentic because I do not even know who I am. So I am truthful to what I know, but behind that, there is a whole sea of potential. So what I usually say is, I have to look at my hand here for a moment. Okay, so here is the sun, right? Remember? So I thought, okay, if I look at imposter syndrome, it's usually when I get close to the sun, and then life told me something beautiful. It says, Markus, imposter syndrome is no curse. Imposter syndrome is actually a compliment from life telling you what you're about to do is worth the while. But it takes guts to go through the human limitations and to believe here is actually where I have to go, and here is the veil between atmosphere and space, And once you actually believe, gosh, I am not limited as much as I thought I am. I'm being pulled by my vision and my dream up here. And if you focus on here instead of the human sun, which is threatening to burn me if I get too close, guess what happens? You suddenly break through it and you are here in space. And then you're free.
There's and I was actually talking to someone about this yesterday, where she had a really successful LinkedIn post that got a lot of attention and getting a lot of like people reaching out to her about it, but she was really nervous and and there's this uncomfortable feeling because it was outside her comfort zone, which outside what she usually was used to doing. And so she was telling me how uncomfortable she felt, or how like it was just off-putting. And my response to her was, good, enjoy that. It means you're moving in the right direction, because unless you're feeling that, you're not growing, you're not approaching your goals, you're not moving the needle, you're staying in your little safe space. And unless you lean into that discomfort, you're never going to achieve what you want, because in 99% of the time, to get what you really, really want, you have to embrace that discomfort and you have to push yourself, and your brain is going to fight it because your brain is used to surviving in the current situation you're in, and it knows that is safe. And so stepping outside that, your brain goes, oh my gosh, this is new and different, we might die, and freaks out. But you can't listen to that part of the brain, even though its role is to keep you alive. But in doing so, it keeps you from achieving everything you're capable of achieving. Just because you haven't done it before doesn't mean you can't. It just means it's going to be uncomfortable for a while. But once you get comfortable at it, then you know you need to keep pushing further, because you still have more you can do. It's just a matter of understanding that feeling of discomfort is the sign that you're reaching your real goals and potential, not a sign to stop. It's a sign to keep pushing that direction, because you're making progress in towards what you're really capable of achieving, not all the risks and hassles that might happen. So yeah, I totally understand the analogy of trying to get out past this veil. Getting through that is going to be painful and uncomfortable, but it's necessary if you want to actually grow and be successful. And for leaders, I'd imagine there's that happening all the time. If you're trying to grow a company and you've never done it before, you're going to be experiencing that a lot. And most people don't realize what that feeling really means, and they shy away from it, and that ends up making their company fail to grow as they envision, because they themselves can't identify the emotions and they're feeling as we're on the right path, not, oh my gosh, this is scary, let's stop.
That's my entire answer, Karl. You just nailed it, brother. Literally. It's like you had just spoken as an oracle. That's exactly the message.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I've approached that from understanding the human brain and how it works in different parts of the brain, how we make decisions, and emotional intelligence, which is kind of why I kind of started the show, is because that's one of my strengths, is emotional intelligence, and knowing as personally how I feel and why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, and understanding the reasons behind that. And I think it helps when you're trying to coach people, or basically a better version of yourself, to know how your own brain and own emotions will get in the way. Even if they have best intentions, it's not compatible with achieving your goals, and you have to be mindful enough to overcome your own roadblocks. And imagine that leads to a lot of the self-doubt and imposter syndrome as the symptom, imposter symptom, I guess we can call that, that leaders deal with. And often if they're not equipped, if they haven't been through your program or similar ones, that's a huge problem for them.
Let's break it down. What is the program? The program means I work with people. I help them remember that they've gone through similar situations before. I help them remember what it took for that challenge to conquer. And then they actually start mapping it out. And once they mapped it out, I teach them how to apply it. Like, look at it from a homeopathic standpoint. That's what many viewers actually understand. A homeopathic doctor has hundreds of little ingredients, and that person knows how to mix those together. So it becomes the potent medicine that in the end heals. That's exactly what I am. I'm basically an emotional, universal homeopathic doctor in my own field. I can help people to understand what those hundreds of ingredients are. I can teach them. I can walk with them. That's why I'm a sparring partner. I don't go in as a consultant, let's say 10 hours at $500 or $1,000, and then I walk away. No, I go in on a retainer basis, on a profit share basis, and I say, look, I am part of this club now, literally. So that's what it comes down to understand the mechanics of yourself, to understand the making of yourself as a leader, and then to understand, okay, I'm actually lacking quite shitload here of things which I thought is just a God-given talent. For example, how to hire people. Oh, goodness me, Markus, I'm an entrepreneur. I know how to hire. It's like, no, the heck you are. You have no bloody clue what it means to hire the right people. It's an art form you have to learn. Okay, now you have hired the right people. They leave me all the time. Yes, of course, because retention is a God-given talent. No, you have to understand human beings in order to keep them. And in order to keep them, you have to understand yourself first. So you see where it goes, right? It all comes down to know thyself. And I'm an expert in helping people to remember who they are, to understand who they are, to apply it. That's when, my friends sometimes say, but Markus, what if would happen if one of your concepts, concept maps, where like 20 or 30 pages are in it, what if that actually gets into wrong hands? If your concept gets suddenly out into the world? Say, I would love that moment, because nobody could do anything with it. You see, and that's the difference between being a coach and a consultant. Coach and consultant, if their maps are being stolen, they're screwed, Richard's screwed. But someone like me, it's all about transformation. And the transformation happens in the work, not in the theory. And that's where the imposter syndrome lands in the end. It's about an authentic confidence, which we want to go after, an authentic confidence.
Well, thank you so much for connecting with me today, Markus. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection podcast, please leave a review, and share it. If you'd like to connect with myself or Markus, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.
Thank you so much, Karl.